Hi, this is Jason Medore, and in today's video I wanted to discuss how I got started collecting records, why I do it, and what it means to me. So I'm doing this video as a response to a YouTube user inquiry about why someone in my age group particularly collects these old records and listens to them when most of the people in my age group don't. And hopefully this video will help answer some of those questions that they have. So to begin with, how I got started was I actually owe most of the debt to my father, because my father was born in 1961, and like me, he was a musically inclined person basically since birth, and he also had the advantage of growing up in the 70s, and that was a time when most of the people who had originally bought all of the old 78 records and diamond discs and gramophones and things like that at the turn of the century were dying off. And frequently they were leaving these things to their family members, and their family members didn't want anything to do with them usually, so they would sell them to my father for pennies on the dollar. So my father could over 1 or 2 days, hit a bunch of estate sales and yard sales and end up with boxes and boxes of 78s that he got for next to nothing. And and that's how he started amassing a really good quality collection of 78s. And he continued doing that until I came along in 1993, and by that time, he had also won an orthophonic Victrola Model 4.3 from a barn auction that he got, I think, sometime in the late 70s. And he played all the 78s on that. And when I showed an interest in them, then he, exposed me to the different varieties of records that he had and things like that. And, I thought they were okay, nothing great. But then one day, probably like 96 or something like that, he went to Half Price Books and he picked up a record for 50 cents. And he had no idea that I would enjoy it as much as I did. So he just picked it up for 50 cents and he played it on the Victrola one day. And according to him, I just really showed a huge interest in this one particular record. And so he played it for me all the time. It's a miracle that it hasn't worn out yet. But yeah, he played it all the time, and it was a record that really showed me that, hey, in order to get good music, I don't have to listen to the radio. I don't have to, dig through all the cassette tapes that my dad has. I don't have to dig through all the CDs. I can actually go out and get these old records, from, at the time they were about 60 years ago, that have great musicians and good songs on them, and they can be found for basically a song. So that record in question that got me started in collecting is this one right here. Let me take it out of the sleeve. Will it show up? Yes, it will. Alright, yep, this is a copy of Irving Aronson and His Commanders' Waffles. It's a record from 1926. And like I said, it was the one that really got me started in collecting, and it's a pretty good tune. If I don't have it posted on my YouTube channel, I could probably transfer it digitally here and upload it to my YouTube channel in the next few days. It's a pretty good song. I still enjoy listening to it and everything, so I'm very glad that he bought it. So that record was basically the catalyst that got me started in collecting. Now, the switch to vinyl, however, did not actually happen until I was a little bit older. So I actually started collecting 78s before I started collecting vinyl. And how I got interested in collecting vinyl was because my father had also amassed a pretty big collection of LPs. And he still has it, but at the time he had a dual turntable that he brought from the 80s, and obviously he would not want his 6 or 7 year old son, fiddling with it and playing with it. So the vinyl was basically off limits to me. But I still wanted to listen to it, so in order to hear it, I would have to go to him and he'd play it for me. That all changed, though, when I was in 4th grade, because when I was in 4th grade, I had a wonderful teacher named Mrs. Swanson, and I am forever indebted to her because she took on the hedonistic, masochistic bully that was the school principal in order to make this happen. But that's neither here nor there. What she did was, in her classroom, there was this old Caliphone 1430K 4-speed record player, and she wasn't using it. No one else in the school was using it, and it was just sitting there collecting dust. And I can't remember how this happened. Obviously, it was a very long time ago, but through the course, I guess, of some kind of conversation she and I was having, I told her that was collected records, and and everything that I just told you. And then she was like, "Oh well, if you don't have anything to play vinyl records on, you could probably just take that record player over in the corner. It worked the last time I remember using it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I took the record player home with me, and sure enough, it worked fine. It had a brand new needle in it too. So I used that record player for the school year, and of course I had to bring it back when I was done, so I hope it's in good hands, because I have no idea what happened to it after I left elementary school. But anyway, so that was the player, though, that allowed me to play vinyl. So at that time I had a 4-speed player, so I was also saying, oh, well, 78 stopped being made after about 1958 in the US. So from about 1958 onwards, that player allowed me to have all the music that I wanted on that player. And so because of that, I would also accompany my father to two great record stores that we have here in the Twin Cities. One of which is Vintage Music Company, and Vintage Music Company specializes pretty much in just 78s. They have some diamond discs and cylinders and other reel-to-reels that other antique audio formats, but mostly they're 78s. So I would accompany my father when he would go shopping there. Whenever we had a little bit of spending money, we'd go there. And the other store that we would go to is Jaime's Vintage Records. And Jaime's Vintage Records specializes mostly in vinyl. They have some 78s, but they're mostly vinyl. So between those two stores, I could pretty much, with $15 or $20, I could come out with, a big stack of records that had good music on them, and I could just learn it that way. So I've been basically doing that ever since. I've sold off probably about a third of my collection since then, because I'm not really interested in having the rare stuff just for the sake of having it. Usually what I would do is I would just transfer it, upload it to YouTube, and then if an interested collector came along who wanted the physical copy, I would just sell it to them. So about a third of my collection was composed of that, just rare records that I was like, oh, well, it doesn't matter to me if I have them physically or digitally. And if someone's willing to give me more money for it than what I bought it for, I'll just, I won't be an idiot. I'll give it to them that way. But the remaining 2/3 of my collection is stuff that, is, relatively common, but still really good musically. So those are the records that I actually intend to hang on to. And I'm pretty happy with what I've amassed so far. And what's also interesting about it, too, is that because these are recordings from anywhere from 50 to 100 years ago, you can get a very different style of musicianship than you would nowadays. Like for instance, what record collecting also means to me musically is it helped me grow as a vocalist. Because I found out after my voice changed that I have a pretty good singing voice, and I took lessons to make it happen. And right away, the music teacher I was with said, "You have a very unique sound to you that I haven't heard in any of my other students." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, because when you're singing, you actually sound like a real opera singer. You don't sound like a beginning vocal student." And those words just kind of stuck with me throughout my course of study, but I didn't actually put two and two together until a few years ago with what he meant. Because when I would go to, accompany my father to Vintage Music and everything, I would sometimes pick up opera records made by legendary opera singers. And because of the nature of the recording with, singing into an acoustic horn and cutting a record on a wax lathe, the the singers had to be very precise, they had to have great diction, and they couldn't have messed up, because if they messed up, there was no way to erase the grooves that was already cut on the recording blank. You'd have to toss the recording blank out and then start over again. So the artists I listened to on these operatic recordings tended to be very highly skilled, very competent, and excellent with the language and the diction, and they were able to convey all of that feeling into their performances on the record. So when I started singing, singing semi-professionally as well with the Minnesota Opera, that was something else that was pointed out to me. They said, you sound like an actual professional opera singer, because I had listened to all of these records from before that featured artists doing those things. So right off the bat, I was exposed to like the best of the best. And I really am grateful for that, because it helped me out with getting into college and getting scholarships for music study, things like that. So I'm just very grateful for that. And the other thing that helped me musically was it allowed me to expand my musical genres. And what I mean by that is because on old 78s and 45s, some albums too, the genre of music you can find is practically unlimited. And what's nice about that too is oftentimes the artists that were on them were very highly competent, but they never really amassed any great fame or fortune, or were particularly well known. And just as an example, I pulled out one record from my collection that I can show you here. Here it is. Yep, this is a record called Indianola Patrol, backed with Toots. This is a ragtime mandolin solo by Dr. Clarence Penny. Now this record is uploaded to my YouTube channel, so if you want to listen to it, I highly recommend you do. It's a great record, and I love both sides of it. But it's also a great example of what you can find in record collecting, because, for example, if you're familiar with like Homer and Jethro and their types of acoustic jazz, I never really got into that until I found this record. Because I didn't even really know that such a thing existed, because I thought jazz was strictly, like either chamber jazz or was like, big band swing stuff. I didn't realize that you could actually create jazz on acoustic instruments. So that record also helped me out, and again, it's just a good example of I don't know who Dr. Clarence Penny was, other than he was the president of a mandolin club at Columbia University at the turn of the century. Other than that, I have no idea who he was. But on the recording, you hear that he's extremely competent. He has great musicianship, and it really comes through on that record. And it's just it's a treat that it's a pleasure to listen to, but it also expands your musical horizons. So that's also why I urge people who are considering record collecting, don't just get into vinyl, because that's a craze these days. Everyone wants a turntable, but nobody wants Victrola. If you're going to go and be a serious record collector, I can't stress enough that you collect everything from basically Berliner Gramophone to hip-hop records that were released a year ago, because the whole point of record collecting is not just collecting things. Now, if you want to collect things, you can collect artwork, you can collect stamps, you can collect rocks, but the whole point of records is to listen to them. So if you are indeed going to begin record collecting, go all out with it. Get a turntable that can accommodate can accommodate diamond discs and 45s and transcription records and everything, because you don't know what you're going to find, and that's the whole point with record collecting. And I'm very grateful that I did start record collecting, because I think that if I didn't and I wasn't exposed to all this, I probably would not be as good of a musician as I am today. So I owe a debt of gratitude to all the factors that made me, record collecting, but I also owe a debt of gratitude to the artists on them. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think, and if you're a seasoned collector like I am, please add your comments in the comment section below, or do a video reply to this. I would love to hear more about it, and be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, Jason Medore here. Happy start to 2015, and I'll see you later.